Sergeant Andrew Colburn's name has been brought up multiple times so far in this trial. And now, today, he himself is under oath. And we finally get to hear what he has to say. In our last episode, we wrapped up Sergeant William Tyson's cross examination. Tyson talked about himself kind of being the, watchdog over Manitowoc officers as they went through Stephen Avery's home. We learned about the bleach bottle. Oh no, not in the laundry room. How scandalous. And we learned about notebooks that were shown to have Teresa's number in it. Never mind that there were several other numbers as well. Just forget about that part. Then we hear about the hood latch swab taken from the RAV4 months after it was in evidence. That's not suspicious at all. We now move on to one of the most anticipated witnesses of this entire trial, Sergeant Andrew Colburn. Real quick, before we start, I know a lot of you come back each episode, but only a small percent are actually subscribed. If that's you, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all new releases. It helps more than you know. The jury has just been given their morning break. They are now back in the room, and the court says, Mr. Kratz, at this time, you may call your next witness. And Attorney Kratz says, state will call Andrew Colburn to the stand. The clerk has him raise his right hand. He's called as a witness. He's sworn in. He spells his last name, etc., etc. And then Attorney Kratz says, you don't have to be quite so close. So he must be talking very loudly into the microphone. But then the direct examination begins. And the questioning is done by the prosecutor, Attorney Kratz. Mr. Colburn, can you tell us, how are you employed, please? I'm a patrol sergeant with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. How long have you been a law enforcement officer? Since 1996. Prior to 1996, what did you do? I was a corrections officer from 1992 to 1994, also with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. What does a corrections officer do? A corrections officer is a non-sworn, non-law enforcement officer that is a responsibility for security of the jail. All right. How was it that you became a sworn law enforcement officer? When a position opened up at the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, I did perform the state written test, performed an agility test, went on an eligibility list, and eventually I was selected. What are your current duties with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department? I'm a assistant shift commander for the noon to 8 shift, so I have some administrative duties and then I have some patrol duties. Prior to being selected as a law enforcement officer, did you have any duties in your prior life that in any way prepared you for being a law enforcement officer? No. Sergeant, you hold the rank of sergeant? Yes, sir. And in early November of 2005, did you hold that same rank? Yes, sir. What were your duties back in early November of '05? Essentially the same duties that I hold today. I was a patrol supervisor I work a 6-day on, 3-day off rotation. So on the days that the lieutenant that's assigned to the shift is off, I would be the shift commander. So you have supervisory responsibilities as well. Yes, sir. I'm going to direct your attention to November 3rd of 2005. Ask if you were employed on that evening. Yes, sir. Do you recall what your duties were on November 3rd? I was the shift commander for the noon to 8 shift. That's the shift I'm assigned to. Sometime during that shift, Sergeant Colburn, were you informed of a Calumet County missing persons investigation that was ongoing? Yes, sir. And being involved in that, being aware of that investigation, Freudian slip, maybe? Let's continue. Being aware of that investigation, were you asked to assist in any way? Yes, sir. Tell the jury how you were asked to assist. I was contacted by, I believe it was Inspector or Investigator Mark Wiegert from the Calumet County Sheriff's Office, who contacted the dispatch center by telephone, who then transferred the call to my patrol car. He asked if I could respond to, I believe he gave me the address of 12928 Avery Road. He asked if I knew where that was, and I told him, yes, I believe that that was the address of Avery Auto Salvage. And he asked if I could go there and check for a missing person because they had a missing person report that had generated in Calumet County, and it had been determined through the course of their investigation that she had been out at the Avery Salvage Yard taking pictures of a vehicle that was for sale. At the time that Investigator Wiegert asked for your assistance, did Investigator Wiegert tell you other places within Manitowoc County that Ms. Hallbach had known to have been on the 31st of October? I don't believe in the initial phone call that he did. All right. Sometime later that evening, you heard? Yes, sometime later that evening, he gave me another address on County Highway B and another name and asked me to check there as well. What name was that? Just so we're going to eventually get there. I believe the first name was George. I know the last name was Zipperer. Sergeant Colburn, are you at all familiar with the Avery Salvage business itself? Yes. Tell the jury how you are familiar with that business. I have been personally a customer of the Avery Auto Salvage business, as well as I have had contacts there through with law enforcement. And I have children that are the same age as some of the owners of Avery Auto Salvage, so I had contact with them through the course of school events. All right, let's take those. Well, when we discuss this, I'm going to show you what's been received as, oh my God, wait for it, folks, Exhibit 86. Can you tell us what that is, please? That's an overhead, like an airplane view, bird's eye view of the Avery Auto Salvage. Prior to the 3rd of November 2005, had you been to that property? Prior to 2005? Prior to November 3rd of 2005, had you been to that property? Yes. And under what circumstances? Can you tell the jury about that? Again, as a customer. Let's talk about that first. What do you mean as a customer? I have several older vehicles. One, as a matter of fact, is a 1950 Chevrolet pickup truck. And I, in the process of tinkering around with it, I have gone to several auto salvage, and I have always been referred to the Avery Auto Salvage as the place to go if you are looking for an older model vehicle parts or parts for an older model vehicle. Was there one person in particular that you would normally have contact with at the Avery Auto Salvage? No, actually, usually there were two. Either I had contact with Charles Avery or Earl Avery. All right. They are brothers, and in fact, the owners of the business. Is that right? Yes, sir. Let me ask you this, Sergeant Colburn. If you know prior to the 3rd of November 2005, when was the last time you were at the Avery Auto Salvage business? I think the last time I was at the Avery Auto Salvage business would have been 1999. All right, so at least 6 years previously. Yes, sir. But you knew where it was. Yes, sir. Then on November 3rd, after Mr. Wiegert asked for your help, did you proceed to the scene? Yes, sir. And that's 2005. Is that right? Yes, sir. Can you tell the jury, please, what happened when you got there on November 3rd? Again, I knew that Earl Avery, who was probably the person that I have had the most contact or know the best, doesn't live on the Avery Auto Salvage property. So what I was initially trying to do was to make contact with Charles Avery, who does reside on there. I knew I didn't know if he owned the business, but I certainly knew that he managed the business. So I was going to make contact with him and ask him if he had seen someone on the property taking pictures of a vehicle that was for sale. In looking for Charles Avery, do you remember what building you went to? Well, initially, I was kind of surprised. when I drove in, because the shop area, there were new buildings and things had changed since the last time I was there. But I was attempting to make contact at his residence, which I believe is right behind that large square-shaped building. We're handing you a laser pointer to assist in your, I believe that, testimony. I thought that was his residence right there. And you were pointing actually to the residence, which would be just the south of that one right there. You have to wait until I finish my question, sir. You are pointing to a trailer or a residence just south of the Avery business itself. And I think counsel is willing to stipulate that that is Charles Avery's residence. Attorney Strang says, certainly my understanding. And the court says, all right, the record will reflect the stipulation. And then Attorney Kratz continues. Did you drive or walk into this property? I drove. Can you tell the jury where you came in from, please? There is, to my knowledge, there is only one entrance onto the property, and that's off Avery Road, which the whole of Avery Road isn't pictured on that picture. But I ended up coming down that dirt road there and parking almost where there is a vehicle parked right now. Why don't you show us where you parked? If I zoomed into that location, would that help us? All right, we have now zoomed in to Exhibit 86. Could you again show the jury about where it was that you parked? You are pointing, which would be just to the north of the large building, which is something we have been calling the new office or the new shop building. Is that correct? Yes, sir. All right. After parking at that location, tell the jury what happened. By the way, about what time was this that you got there? I'm guessing around 7 o'clock, between 6:30 and 7:30. Was it light out or was it dark? It was dark. After parking there, Sergeant Colburn, what happened? I exited my squad car and I was going to walk down the road, that road right there, in order to access Charles' residence. Almost as soon as I got out of my car, I heard something behind me. I turned and Steve Avery was walking towards me, and he had come out of that residence right there. Do you know whose residence that is? I believe that's Al and Dolores Avery's residence. Did you have any conversation with Stephen Avery at that time? Yes, I did. And could you describe that conversation for the jury, please? I think Steve initiated the conversation with me by asking me what I wanted, what I was doing there. Were you dressed similar to what you are dressed today? Yes, I was in uniform. Did you have a marked squad car? Yes, I did. What did you tell Mr. Avery? I told Mr. Avery, that I had received a call from Calumet County and that they had informed me that there was a girl missing from Calumet County and asked him if she had come out to their property to photograph a vehicle that they were selling. Did Mr. Avery have a response for you? Yes, he said that she had been there. Did he tell you what day she had been there? I think I might have told him that, what day that she should have been out there. I don't recall if we mentioned a date, but I do remember asking him what time she had been out there. Did Mr. Avery recall this young woman? Yes. Did he name her for you? No. Did he tell you what she had done at his property that day? He said that she was taking some pictures of a van that his sister was selling. Mr. Avery tell you how long the woman had been on his property? He said 5 or 10 minutes. Did you inquire of Mr. Avery whether or not he had personal contact with this woman on the date that she was out there? I asked Mr. Avery if she had said where she was going, and he said I never talked to her. She was only here 5 or 10 minutes and she left. But he never talked to her? That's what he told me. He never talked to her. Did he describe that further? How he knew she was there? He said he saw her out the window taking the pictures. Okay. Did you complete that conversation with Stephen Avery? Do you recall that conversation? I told Mr. Avery that her parents and her family were getting worried, and he was sure that she didn't mention where she might have been going after she left. And he said, no, I didn't talk to her. She was only here a few minutes and then she left. What was Mr. Avery's demeanor like as he was talking to you? Was he cooperative? Yes, he was very cordial. Mr. Avery indicate to you at the time, that is, when this young woman had been on his property? He said he thought between 2 or 2:30. What did you do then? I believe I thanked him for talking with me and I started to get back in my car. And I believe Mr. Avery told me that he hoped she turned up soon. What did you do then? I left. I left the property and I contacted, he is the undersheriff of our department now, but at the time he was the deputy inspector of the operations division. I called him. What's his name? Greg Shetter. And I let him know that Calumet County was investigating a missing persons case and that one of the places that it had been mentioned that this party was on at the Avery salvage yard. And I just left there and made contact and that I was unable to locate that person. So wait a minute, Christina. So he drives up, he goes to someone's house, he thinks he knows who lives there, but instead ends up talking to Stephen, asks if he's seen her. He says no, but does remember her being there, said he didn't talk to her. Then he gets back in his car and he leaves and he calls somebody and he says, I just left there and made contact and I was unable to locate that person. And that's all he did? Anyway, let's continue. And he's still answering. And he says, and he suggested that I probably contact Lieutenant Link and see if Lieutenant Link wanted any of our detectives to assist Calumet County in searching anyplace else. Did you do that? Yes, I did. And did you speak with Lieutenant Link that evening? Yes, by phone. And then when I got into the department, because prior to going into the department, I went past the other residents. I must have also contacted Investigator Wiegert and let him know that I hadn't located. Okay, Christine here. So he went past. So he drove past and looked, or what? He doesn't say that he spoke to anybody. Anyway, I'll quit nitpicking. Well, I can't promise anything. Let's continue. And he, I believe, at that time, told me of the other address. So I purposefully drove past that residence. I saw it was dark, but that there were cars in the driveway, but the residence was dark. I didn't see any lights on there, so I ended my tour of duty for patrol. Let me just stop you. Whose residence was this that you drove past? George Zipper's. Go ahead. What did you do? I ended my patrol tour of duty, but I remained on duty to assist Calumet County Detective Dietering and Detective Remacher in making contact at George Zipper's residence. Was that done at that time? It was done, within probably a half hour or 45 minutes of my getting back to the department. The question, Sergeant Colburn, did you assist in that process? Yes, sir. You mentioned that there was a Calumet detective that was involved, as well as Manitowoc. Is that right? Yes, sir. In meeting with the Zipperers? Yes, sir. And again, do you remember who they were? I believe his name is John Dietering. All right. I'm just going to go back just briefly to your contact with Mr. Avery. You mentioned that he was cooperative. Is that right? Yes, sir. I want you to remember back, as best you can, Sergeant Colburn, at that initial meeting with Mr. Avery. You, Sergeant Andy Colburn, did you have any feelings or any inclination that Mr. Avery may have been involved in Miss Halbach's disappearance? Not at that time, no. Did you do anything on the 3rd of November to further investigate Mr. Avery? On November 3rd? Yes. No, sir. Did you ever go back onto his property on the 3rd? No, sir. After going to the Zipperers with Detective, I think it was Remacher and Dietering, what did you do after that? After we were completed at the Zipperers? Yes. I went home. I was done with, I was already on overtime. I checked out and went home. Do you know about what time that was? 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, maybe? All right. Do you remember what you did the rest of that evening? Just probably fell asleep on the couch. I went to bed and, fell asleep. The next day, on the 4th of November, were you working that day? No, sir, I was off that day. It's a Friday. Is that right? Yes, sir. Do you remember what you did on the 4th? We'll get back to that, but do you recall, generally, your day on the 4th of November? Yes, sir. Move your attention one day further. On the 5th, Saturday, the 5th of November, do you recall what you were doing that day or that morning? That was also a regularly scheduled day off for me. Yes, I recall what I did on that day. We'll get into the morning, but let me just jump right into this investigation. Were you contacted at all by any supervisors or superiors that day and asked to participate in this case? I was contacted by the noon to 8 shift commander for that day, and he did ask me to come into work and pick up a patrol vehicle and respond out to the Avery salvage yard. Did you do that? Yes. In a marked vehicle? Yes, I did take a marked vehicle out there. And about what time was it that you arrived at the Avery scene itself? Do you recall? I know I left my house between 4 and 4:30. I probably got out to the Avery salvage yard between 5:15, 5:30, maybe. To your best recollection? Yes. What happened when you got to the Avery salvage business? I made contact with the same supervisor who had called me, and I asked him, "What do you want me to do?" And he informed me that there was a deputy there that had some personal business or matters to attend to. She had been out there since apparently earlier in the day, and he asked me to transport that deputy back to the department so that she could get her own private vehicle and go home, and then come back out to the Avery salvage yard and provide security. Did you do that? Yes. What did you do when you got back to the Avery business? Try to stay in the car as much as possible because it was pouring rain. But they directed my attention to a place way off in the salvage yard where I could see some lights. And somewhere up in this area here, they just told me to sit in the car and not let anyone go down any of these roads. Providing scene security up near what would be the business buildings? Yes. Did you do that? Yes. How long did you have that responsibility? Maybe like an hour, hour and a half. And I was then told that actually I could go home. So I was preparing to do that. I was checking all my equipment to make sure I had everything that I got out there, came out there with. And then I was told that I was going to be needed in a different capacity and not to go home. For those of you who want to get ahead in this trial and don't want to have to wait, you can become a Patreon member and get access to episodes a week before the general public. I'll have the link in the show notes. All right. Let me ask you this, Sergeant Colburn. Anytime that day, anytime on the 5th of November, did you ever make your way down towards the pond or down towards the southeast quadrant of the Avery salvage property? No, sir. Could you point to that area for us with the laser pointer? Point to the northeast corner of the property. I'll specifically ask you about that area. Did you go near that area at all on the 5th of November? No, sir. How about on the 3rd, when you were there 2 days earlier talking to Stephen Avery? No, sir. And were you down there at all on the 4th of November? No, sir. When initially being told that you could leave or that you were in effect packing up to leave, who was it that approached you with other duties? Detective Rummaker. Do you know what you were being asked to do then? He just said, you may want to check in with Inspectigator. You may want to check in with Inspector Wiegert, Detective Wiegert, before you go home, because you can see the huge area here. It's going to have to be checked, and we don't have a lot of people here to do that. Do you know how many sworn law enforcement officers were on scene at that time? Or is that something that you wouldn't even have a guess on? No, I didn't take a head count. I don't know. I would ballpark it at 50 or less, but I don't know. All right. Now, 50 sounds like a lot of police officers. Do you think that's a lot for that size scene? Attorney Strang says irrelevant. The court says sustained. Attorney Kratz then continues. Did you check in with Investigator Wiegert before you left? Yes. And can you tell the jury, please, what that conversation was? I believe he asked me if I was an evidence technician, and I said, yes, I am. And let me stop you there. What all goes into being an evidence technician? It's an investigative portion. It's an investigative duty some police officers are trained to do, and some who may not be interested in that are not. Not every police officer is an evidence technician. You do get special training on how to do photographing, how to identify evidence, how to collect evidence without destroying it. All right. And you had been through that training? Yes, sir. With Manitowoc County, that is, with the Sheriff's Department. Had you performed evidence collection duties prior to November 5th of 2005? Yes, sir. How long had you been an evidence tech? Since 1997. Have you ever executed a search warrant or collected evidence in that capacity before? Yes, sir. After Investigator Wiegert asked you if you were an evidence tech, what were you told to do? I was just told to stand by, not to go home. So I went back out to my patrol car. And again, where was that parked, if you can show us? I may, have moved it closer to the command post, but initially I was parked right in this area here. Again, near the business buildings? Yes, sir. How long did you wait for further assignment? Maybe 5-10 minutes. Now, Sergeant Colburn, did you know what assignment you were going to be given? In other words, did you know where you were going to be directed that night? No, sir. What's the next direction that you recall receiving? I believe the next person I made contact with was Sergeant Bill Tyson from the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, and he was with Lieutenant Link and Detective Remacher. I believe he came out of the command post. They kind of motioned to me, so walked up to them, and Sergeant Tyson said, "You are going to be working for me, and we are going to be going to Steve Avery's trailer." What did working for me mean, or what do you believe it meant? Well, I had been told by this time that the Calumet County Sheriff's Department was leading up this investigation. So I interpreted working for me as, you are the boss and you are going to tell me what to do. Okay. Were you okay with that? Yes. Did you then proceed with Deputy Tyson to the Stephen Avery trailer? Yes, sir. Do you remember how you got there? How you got down there? I believe we took 2 cars. I believe Sergeant Tyson took his Calumet County patrol car, and I don't think we took my marked unit. I think I got in Detective Remacher's car or Lieutenant Link's car, whichever. It was an unmarked Manitowoc County car. All right. Tell us again if you can look at Exhibit 86. Now, where did you drive? Where did you guys go then? I had never been to Steve Avery's trailer before, so I really didn't know where it was. But we drove down this road to that trailer right there. I will zoom in again on Exhibit 86. Do you recall where the cars were parked? I believe we parked them in this driveway here that goes up to that garage. Do you recall that particular search that evening? Yes, sir. How is it that you have an independent memory of that first search of Stephen Avery's trailer? Because I was involved in it. Okay. Did each of the search team members have a specific responsibility within that trailer, if you know? Not really. I did have the specific responsibility of photographing, but as far as collecting, we all worked as a team. It wasn't like one person went here and one person went there. We were always worked together as a team, always within arm's length of one another. Christine here. Well, we all know that's not true, right? Because we've already heard that Link went into the bathroom and the others were still in the bedroom. So anyway, let's continue. Was that by design? Do you know? I don't know if it was by design per se, but it just seemed that this would be the best way for things to work. and that we could be the most careful and concise working together as a team. All right. Let me ask you, Sergeant Colburn, did you know the kinds of things that you were looking for in Stephen Avery's trailer? Not specifically, no. Was there generally a term of things that you were looking for? I was looking for any evidence that would substantiate or eliminate her having been there. Who's her? Teresa Halbach. What rooms were it that the four of you searched? I believe that first night we did search the entire trailer. We started in what I term to be the master bedroom or the largest bedroom. All right. We have already heard from Sergeant Tyson, so what responsibilities? I'm just talking about you now, not the others, but what responsibilities did you have in the search of that bedroom? Again, initially, I did all the photographing that night with a 35 millimeter camera. And then I was looking in. There was a bookcase type piece of furniture next to the bed and a desk next to that. And while I say it's the larger bedroom, it's still kind of a small bedroom. So those pieces of furniture were almost tight together. And there was very little distance between the bed and those pieces of furniture. I mean, maybe 2 foot. And that's the area that I was specifically searching. How many in that bedroom? I'm sorry. How many men were in that bedroom? There was myself, Detective Remacher, Lieutenant Link, and Sergeant Tyson. I'm going to put on the screen an exhibit which has already been received. It's Exhibit 103. It's a computer-generated exhibit. Zoom in specifically into the bedroom. Does that help you better orient yourself to Stephen Avery's bedroom? Yes. Take the laser pointer, please, and tell the jurors in what area you had initial responsibility to search on the 5th of November. This cabinet right here, I guess we could call that a bookcase, and this desk right here. All right. And let's talk about the cabinet first. Mr. Wiegert is going to hand you what's been marked as exhibit number 203, and on 204, ask if you found those items in Mr. Avery's bedroom on the 5th of November. Yes, sir. Tell the jury where you found them, please. That's a shelf right there. There's a little space between that shelf and the top of the cabinet. I found them inside that area. Now, after finding or locating a piece of physical evidence during this search, that is on the 5th, what did you do with that evidence? As soon as I located something that, in my opinion, was of evidence, which doesn't necessarily make it evidence, but if it was, in my opinion, to be of evidentiary value, I stopped what I was doing. I informed Sergeant Tyson, hey, I found some leg irons and handcuffs in here. Then Sergeant Tyson would come over. I would photograph them. Then he collected them and put them, went through the administrative duties that the Calumet County Sheriff's Department requires for logging evidence. The actual seizure or the collection of them was whose responsibility? Calumet County's. Sergeant Tyson? Well, on that evening, yes, Sergeant Tyson, sorry. When you look at Exhibit 103, this computer-generated diagram, other than the roof being ripped off for obvious reasons, does that look the same or similar as it did on the 5th of November? Yes, sir. You see on the wall above the bed, the headboard, there is a gun rack. Do you see that? Yes. Is that how it looked on the 5th of November as well? Yes. Did you see any firearms on that gun rack that evening? There were 2 firearms on that gun rack, just pretty much like it is in the picture. Were you able, Sergeant Colburn, to identify those guns, or at least what kind of guns they were? I know as soon as we walked into the room, we noticed the guns right away. I probably stood right about here, and I could see that one of the guns, I believe it's this lower one, was a muzzle loader, and it had a piece of masking tape on the stock that said Steve. What about the gun on top? Is that a long gun as well? It's a .22 caliber rifle. Now, let me ask you, to the best of your recollection, Sergeant Colburn, Were those firearms seized from Mr. Avery's bedroom on the 5th of November? I don't think we did take them on the 5th of November. No. So the jury understands at that time, that is that first day, that first night, that you guys meaning the law enforcement, got there. Had Teresa Halbach's body or any of her remains been located? No, sir. Did you even know that you were dealing with a crime at that time? Initially, we were still treating this more or less as a missing person. All right. But you were looking for items that had obvious evidentiary value. Is that right? Yes, sir. Christine here. So, yeah, Kratz kind of brings up a good point, right? I mean, and I doubt that he meant to do this, but they're like, we're in this home, we're searching this home. We don't know that a crime has occurred, but we are specifically targeting this home because, as far as we know, we're still looking for a missing person. Then why were they treating it like a potential crime scene? I mean, if they were still looking and trying to locate a person, why wouldn't you just go through and look in, rooms, closets, etc., not only in Stephen Avery's house, but in his sister's house, in, other houses, other locations on the property. And I understand that they're just focusing right on Colburn and that group because they were specifically in Stephen's home. It's not to say I don't know. Maybe there were other searches going on in other houses. I don't know. That's not been brought up yet. But anyway, it just sounds very interesting to me. If they're just still looking for a missing person, why go through all this extra of finding this quote unquote potential evidentiary value items, right? So far, there's no crime as far as they're concerned. No crime has been committed. So why are they doing this at all? Why are they grabbing these items? Let's continue. What were some of the other rooms that, or let me just make this clear. While in that bedroom searching, did you notice anything on the floor? Specifically, did you notice any car key on the floor? No, sir. In looking at or on top of either the desk or the bookcase, did you notice any car key or something that may have had obvious evidentiary value in that regard? Not really? No. Okay. What does that mean? Not really. All right, let's continue. Okay. What other rooms were searched that night? I believe we searched every room in the trailer that evening. Try to get an overview here. This has been received as exhibit number 102. Does this appear to be an overview of the Avery trailer? Again, a computer generated diagram. Yes, sir. Lists both bedrooms, the bathroom, living room, dining room, and kitchen area. Is that right? Yes, sir. Each of those rooms searched that evening? Yes, sir. You said you were taking 35 millimeter photography in that trailer. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Were there other photographs also being taken? I believe Detective Rummaker had brought a small digital camera in as well, and he was taking some digital photos as well. I show you a photo that's been received as evidence. This is exhibit number 163, and ask if you recognize this particular photo. That's a photograph of the master bedroom area I was just talking about in Steve Avery's trailer. Is that how it looked on the 5th of November? Yes, sir. Exhibit number 175, again, which has been received. Could you tell us what this is, if you know? And that's in the living room area of that same trailer, the same residence. And this is like a corner of the living room that was set up as a computer work area. Was that an area that you and your colleagues searched that evening? Detective Remaker was the primary officer that looked at that area, but he did call me over a couple times to have me take pictures of items that he had found. You can't fit 4 grown men into that, no sir, corner. Is that right? After the search was completed, or when the search was wrapping up, Could you tell us how that search ended? How that effort ended? The items that we had decided were of evidentiary value that night were placed in Sergeant Tyson's patrol vehicle, and he stayed with the evidence. We all went back to the command post, and not exactly sure which Calumet County officer told us what time to be there the next day, but we were instructed to return the next day, myself, Lieutenant Link, and Detective Remaker, and we all left at the same time. After leaving the residence on the 5th, can you tell the jury where you went, please? I would have gone back to the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, which is in the city of Manitowoc, and to get my personal vehicle so I could go home. Do you know about what time you cleared the scene? In other words, about what time you left, if you remember. I'm sorry, I don't. I know it was late. That's all. The next day, that is on the 6th of November, were you asked to come back to the scene? Yes, sir. And what were you asked to do on the 6th? On the 6th, when I came out there again with Detective Remaker and Lieutenant Link, and I believe this time, just Lieutenant Link went into the command post to make contact with who we would be working with Cal County that day. And Detective Remaker and I just kind of waited until he came back out. And we were introduced to Deputy Kucharski. And then Deputy Kucharski informed us what our assignment would be for that day. Okay. Prior to arriving on the scene, once again, did you know what your assignment was going to be? No, I had no idea. Was an evidence collection team formed or developed that morning on the 6th? Yes, sir. Do you remember who was involved in that team? It was myself, Lieutenant Link, Detective Remaker, and Deputy Kucharski, who's a employee of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Once again, was it determined who would be in charge of that group of search individuals? After the first day, I didn't need to be told who was in charge. I knew. But Deputy Kucharski told me that he would be responsible for collecting and maintaining security on any evidence that was located that day. All right. What areas then of search were you involved with, if any, on the 6th of November? Initially, we started at the garage at Steve Avery's residence. Tell me about this garage, please. It's a wooden frame structure, maybe like a car and a half garage, not attached to the residence. It had a vehicle parked out in front of it, a black Ford pickup truck. I show you what's been received in evidence as exhibit number 38. Can you tell us what we're looking at here, please? That's Steve Avery's residence. That's his garage. That's his pickup truck. All right. And that garage was searched. Is that right? Yes, sir. Who was that searched by? The aforementioned team, myself, Lieutenant Link, Detective Remaker, and Deputy Kucharski. Do you remember the interior of that garage on the 5th of November? I don't know if, sorry, Christine here. I don't know if this is a typo or what in the transcripts, but it does specifically say, do you remember the interior of that garage on the 5th of November? However, they are clearly, at this point in time, talking about the 6th of November. So, yeah, just kind of a little tidbit there. Let's continue. And he asks, do you remember the interior of that garage on the 5th of November? And he says, yes, sir. Can you briefly describe that for the jury? There was a smaller sport utility vehicle parked in one half of the garage. It was a Suzuki Samurai. There was a snowmobile also parked in there, a Skidoo snowmobile. And then there were some other benches and tools that kind of went all the way around the garage. There wasn't a lot of room in there with all the other apparatus that was in there. In this case already, and I think the defense had asked and has been admitted, exhibit number 119, ask you to take a look at exhibit number 119. Tell us what we're looking at here. That would be the interior of Steve Avery's garage. Fair to say there's a lot of stuff in there? Yes, sir. What kind of search was performed of that garage? Well, the same type of, search that we had performed the night before in his residence. We were looking for anything that would lead us to believe that there was a missing person in there. Each of the items that we see, and we can even zoom into some of these things, was each and every one of those items removed from the garage and thoroughly searched or searched under each and every one of these items? No, no, sir. Wasn't that kind of search? No. In a very broad way, that is, in a overview fashion, because we're going to hear from Deputy Kucharski, but in a very broad sense. Can you tell us the kinds of things that were recovered or viewed while you were in that garage? Almost as soon as we stepped in the garage, I noticed, as did everyone else, that there were several spent shell casings lying on the floor of the garage. What's a shell casing? It's the brass portion of a bullet. After the bullet has been expended or fired, the casing is usually ejected through from the firearm and lands in close proximity to the shooter, usually on the ground. Let me ask you this, Sergeant Colburn. Are you familiar with shell casings for different kinds of or different calibers of firearms? Yes. By visual inspection, that is, without picking them up or without even taking a look at those shell casings, were you able to determine what caliber weapon was used to fire those bullets? Yes. How were you able to determine that? The shell casings that were laying on the ground were small, for one. They were brass and they didn't have a center primer. They had been fired on the corner of the bottom of the casing. In other words, the rim of the casing. And a .22 caliber weapon is one of the only weapons that is a rim fire weapon. Most weapons have a primer in the center of the bullet. This does not. It's fired off the rim. How many, what you believed were .22 caliber shell casings, were readily apparent or viewable to the naked eye as you entered that garage? There were quite a few, 12, maybe 12 plus. Do you know for sure? No, sir, I don't. During the course of that search, were the shell casings that were at least out in plain view seized by Deputy Kucharski? Yes. We photographed them first, where they were lying. Initially, Deputy Kucharski and I were both doing photographs, but then we thought perhaps that was a bit redundant. So I just let Deputy Kucharski felt more than comfortable taking the photographs. So I just stopped taking pictures and assisted with locating. About how long did the search of this garage take? 1 hour, 1.5 hours? Looking at the stuff, I will call it junk. I don't know if I will get an objection about that, but probably not. Looking at the junk that we see here, in a 1 hour search, were you able to thoroughly search this garage? No, I mean, if we were looking for something minute, you could spend easily an hour just in this area right here. All right. Were you given other search assignments that day? Yes, sir. Can you tell us where you were next assigned to search? I believe the next assignment, was the Ford pickup truck that was parked right in front of the garage. And that was Steve's black truck that we had seen before. I do have to mention there were several times, and I believe this was one of them, where we would be searching a specific area. Somebody from Cal County would come and say, I need your assistance doing this. So we would stop what we were doing and assist them with another project and then go back. So I believe before we started searching that Ford pickup truck, I was asked to photograph some burning barrels and assist in loading them up into a covered trailer. All right. Did you do that? Yes, sir. Just as long as we have this picture up, first, we're going to go back to Exhibit 38. Was that the truck that you assisted in searching? Yes. Now, you talked about some burn barrels. Where were these located? Behind or to the side of Steve's garage. There was 3 or 4 of them. Did you know whose burn barrels those were? No, I didn't. You said that there were others that were assisting in the recovery of those. Do you know who those other individuals were? I didn't know, everyone's name from the Calumet County Sheriff's Department or the Department of Criminal Investigations that was working there. I just recognized that some of the officers were not at all connected with Manitowoc County, but they were uniformed. And I saw Calumet County, Sheriff's Department patches on their uniforms, but I do not know them by name. There were some Manitowoc officers also involved. Yes. Those burn barrels, I think a picture of them has been received as Exhibit 52. I'm going to show you that picture. Do you recognize that? Yes, I took that picture. Who is that we see in the picture? That's Detective Remacher from the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. These are the 4 burn barrels that you assisted in recovering and loading. Is that right? Yes, sir. Looks like it's raining here again. Is that right? Yes, I wanted to get a picture to show that we were trying our best to protect the contents of the barrel. And that's the reason that tarp is on there. After those barrels were loaded, did you proceed to complete the search of Steve's black truck? Yes, sir. All right. After that effort, what did you do then? Again, this is going to be one of those times that I was pulled away for another project. We were almost completed with the search of Steve's truck when another Calumet County supervisor told me or asked me where the Maribel Caves Park was. And I said, I described where it was, but not being from Manitowoc County, he didn't really know where it was. And he said, well, some searchers have found some things at the Maribel Caves Park. Can you go out there, see what they have? If you think it's evidence, pick it up. So myself and Detective Remacher went out to Maribel Caves Park, where we made contact with a civilian search party, and they showed us some things that they had found, and we ended up bagging them up and turning them over to the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. What did you do then? When I got back, then I believe the search of Steve's truck, I think, had been completed then. In my absence, Deputy Kucharski had completed the search. And then I would have to take a look at his report to see what our next assignment was. I believe we were sent to Chuck Avery's residence. No, either Chuck's or Steve's sister. And I'm not positive which one was next. Who is Steve's sister? Her first name is Barb. I believe at that time her last name was Janda. All right. Did you assist in the search of Barb Janda's trailer? Yes. And we're going to hear from Detective Remacher later. But do you recall being present when a telephone answering machine was located? Yes. This has been received as exhibit number 55. Can you tell us what we're looking at, please? I believe that's the answering machine that was in Barb Janda's residence. Who else was present when this answering machine was investigated or searched? It was the same search team that had gone into Steve Avery's garage. Lieutenant Link, myself, Detective Remacher, and Deputy Kucharski. Were the messages on this machine examined? When we found the answering machine, I saw that there were messages on there. I said, let's unplug it and take the answering machine. And of course, the conversation between all of us, we said, well, what if somehow in the unplugging process we lose the messages? So yes, we hit the play button and listened to the messages, and Detective Remacher recorded the messages as they were being played. Did you have occasion that day to re-enter Stephen Avery's trailer? I believe that was the day that our whole team was asked to go back into Steve's trailer and obtain a serial number. I think that was the day that we were asked to obtain a serial number off Steve's computer, the tower portion of his computer. Are you sure about that, or are you guessing? I'm not positive if that was the day or not. I know that was one of the assignments that I completed. I thought it was that day, but I'm not positive. I do know also that day we had to go back into Stephen Avery's trailer and collect his weapons. Can you again describe those weapons? He had a 2-place or gun rack over his bed. There were 2 weapons on the gun rack. One was a .22 caliber rifle, and the other was if I remember correctly, was a .50 caliber muzzle loader. We are going to have these marked, actually, and Attorney Kratz says, Mr. Fallon, if you could have them marked. Attorney Fallon says they're marked. Attorney Kratz says, oh, I'm sorry. And then the questioning continues. Do you see a picture of the .22 caliber rifle? Yes, sir. And what exhibit number is that? It is Exhibit 164. See if I can find that here. Do you recognize exhibit number 164? Yes, it's a .22 caliber rifle that we located in Steve Avery's bedroom. I have put up a photograph of exhibit number 164. Again, does that .22 caliber rifle look the same or similar as it did when it was seized on the 6th of November? Yes, sir. Did you, by the way, that day on the 6th, have occasion to, at all, inspect or further inspect that rifle? When we collected the rifle, in order to manage an evidence room, we first needed to make sure that the weapon wasn't loaded. So I did pull the action back to see if it was going to eject a round. And I believe I pulled the tube out, which is under the barrel there. Why don't you show us with the laser pointer? That portion of the weapon is the magazine. To load it, you pull a tube out, I believe, and insert rounds through that notch right there. This is the action of the magazine. It's a semi-automatic weapon. So I pulled this action back to see if there was a round inside the barrel. And I believe the safety is right there on the weapon. And I would have checked to make sure that the safety was on, because if someone handling the weapon, obviously, if it was loaded with the safety off, it could fire. Sure. Are you familiar with a semi-automatic rifle, such as exhibit number 164? Yes, sir. Now, a tube-loaded or tube-fed magazine, for those on the jury that aren't gun enthusiasts, can you tell us just generally how that works? This portion of the weapon right here is where it's loaded. At the very end here, you can twist a knob and you can pull out like a plastic plunger. And you load, you would have to turn the weapon almost upside down. But if you can see that, there's a little notch there. That's where you put the rounds in, and then you just slide this tube back in until it locks. And if it doesn't lock, you put too many rounds in. You have to get it so that that locks. As you fire the weapon, there's a spring on there, and it just keeps pushing the rounds back into the chamber. After a .22, you mentioned a rim-fire bullets, but after the shell casings are ejected, where do they come out of? Out of that area right there, that silver area. And with a semi-automatic weapon, do you have to reload it or cock it or do anything that any action like that we might hear with other weapons? No, sir. A semi-automatic weapon will continue to fire as fast as you can pull the trigger. You must release the trigger to its sear each time, but it will continue to fire as fast as you can pull the trigger until all the shells are expended. By the way, Sergeant Colburn, I don't know if you know this, but do you know what kind of weapon this is? What brand name weapon? I know when we cataloged the weapon when we took it, and when Deputy Kucharski took it in as evidence, I read the manufacturer name to him, but I don't recall who manufactured that weapon. That's fine, thank you. You said there was a second weapon that was seized, is that right? Yes, sir. You gave me a photograph that's marked Exhibit 165. Why don't you tell us what that is? That's a muzzle loading weapon similar to like a musket from the Revolutionary War or frontier period. It's called muzzle loading because that's where you load it, through the muzzle. Where were these items seized from? Steve Avery's bedroom on a gun rack that was hanging above his bed. Is there anything else that was seized from Mr. Avery's trailer that day, that is, on the 6th of November, that you can recall? Not that I can recall, no, sir. Any other buildings that were asked to search that day? Not that I specifically recall, no. All right. Attorney Kratz then says, Judge, before going into the next day's search for the 7th, this might be a good time for a lunch break. And the court says, all right. The court agrees. So at this point, the lunch break is taken, and we, at this point, are going to end this episode and pick right back up with more of the direct examination by Attorney Kratz of Sergeant Colburn in the next episode. So let's go over what we just heard. This episode focused on, obviously, Sergeant Andrew Colburn's direct testimony. We're still not done with that. During the Stephen Avery trial. And there's a lot to unpack here. Colburn walks us through his involvement starting November 3rd, 2005, when Teresa Halbach was still officially a missing person. At that point, no body had been found. There was no cause of death. There was no forensic evidence pointing to a crime. Just a missing woman, last seen, evidently, on the Avery property. And yet, despite that, what do? They start collecting items from Stephen Avery's trailer that they deem to be, quote, potentially evidentiary, specifically the handcuffs and these, quote, leg irons. We talked about this before. But what do they leave behind? Guns, 2 firearms, clearly visible in a rack over Stephen's bed. Let me just say that again. They took the handcuffs and these leg irons, but left the guns hanging on the wall. Make that make sense. And don't forget, this was still classified as a missing person case. So why were they seizing anything at all? And legally, that's a serious question. According to the Wisconsin Constitution, Article 1, Section 11, and the Fourth Amendment, law enforcement can't just start grabbing property from your home because it might be important later. They need probable cause. They need a warrant. They might have had one. I don't know if that warrant included that they could seize items. Or one of a few narrow exceptions, like exigent circumstances or plain view doctrine. And even then, the item's connection to a crime has to be immediately obvious. But as Colburn himself admits under oath, they didn't even know if a crime had occurred yet. So let me ask you, what kind of investigation were they really conducting here? One looking for a missing person, or one building a case before the facts lined up? Because here's the thing that bothers the shit out of me. If you're trying to honestly find a missing person, wouldn't you start by searching the places where they might still be alive? You know, you could look in bedrooms, you can look in closets, you could look at where she lived, you could talk to the people that she lived with and nearby buildings, hell, vehicles. You don't start by snatching up restraints from someone's nightstand unless you've already decided that they're guilty or you already know that she's dead. And then there's the whole chain of command issue. Calumet County was supposed to be in charge, but Manitowoc County deputies, including Colburn and Link, were all over that scene, collecting, photographing, making decisions about what's of value, even after the conflict of interest had already been established. And let's be real, Colburn knew these people. He'd been a customer at the Avery salvage yard. His kids went to school with theirs. He knew the property. He knew the family. He wasn't some neutral third party walking into a blind search. And his testimony, it's full of little gaps, like little oddities, like the way he drove past another suspect's house but didn't go in, the way he doesn't remember who gave what instruction, the way that he says he always stayed within arm's length of each other in the trailer, when we know this is not true. And that matters because this whole investigation from day one hinges on who was where, when, and what they touched. And yet again, we're left with more questions than answers. Was it standard procedure? Right now, it doesn't look like it. Was it constitutional? That's debatable. Was it objective? Not by a long shot. So as we head into episode 29, where Colburn's direct examination continues, I want you to keep this in mind. Sometimes it's not just what is collected that matters. It's why it's collected, when it's collected, and by whom it was collected. I have a feeling this is only going to get more complicated as we go on. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Beach House 34 channel, and I'll be back soon with more of what Colburn had to say. Bye for now.